Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle, and I'm joined by a very good co-host, Mr. Michael Hall. Reed will not be joining us for this episode because you guys shamed him into disappearing. And the Burgundy Zone is a part of the Frederick Podcast Network. You can find out more by going to www.listenfrederick.com. And we are joined by very special guests, Mr. Mitch Tischler, very popular man around the D.C. area. Washington fans all know him. And the title of tonight's episode is Everybody Wins. So, Mitch, I can't thank you enough for joining us, sir. How are you doing on this Wednesday evening?
I mean, I'm on with you guys, so I'm winning.
There we go. That's a good transition, Mitch. I appreciate you for doing that. Big storyline of today. Obviously, the Commanders did not practice on this Wednesday. Dan Quinn earlier in the week had said that they were going to have 3 days then off, and today was obviously the off day, but they were busy, so to speak. They were able to bring in off waivers. They were bringing in Riley Patterson, the kicker from the Jacksonville, and they brought back Byron Pringle. Was this surprising at all to you? Pringle, actually, I thought played pretty well last year.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised that they brought somebody a kicker in. I mean, it's been a rough couple days for Ahmed. He missed a couple in the last practice, I guess, which was on Tuesday. And excuse me if I get my days screwed up because it's kind of hard. It's a Groundhog Day at training camp now. But the first day that they are out in pads, he was kicking some 50-ish yarders, and those things were coming out low, and he wasn't making them. And just, it didn't really look like really an NFL kicker. We were joking about who was the Commanders kicker that kicked into the back of the head of his long snapper.
That wasn't Blewett, was it?
Blewett. Yeah, it was Blewett.
It
Yeah,
was
Blewett. And it just kind of looked the same. And they were going to bring in somebody new. I'm a little surprised that it came this quickly, just because I like having as many position players in camp as possible. You never know when that 89th player on the training camp roster is going to pop. I mean, I've been talking about Austin Eckler. When he went to the Chargers, he was coming out of a D2 school. He was probably one of the last 5 or 10 players that was on that training camp roster, and look at what he's turned into now. So I like the idea of having as many of those guys out there as possible, but bringing in competition is never a bad thing. And Riley Patterson is NFL kicker, doesn't have a big leg, but he's an NFL kicker that will hopefully be consistent from at least inside of 50.
Yeah, Eckler's one that just absolutely ripped, man. He's one of those guys that has muscles on top of muscles. That's kind of insane. But the stats for Riley Peterson, 24 years old. This is from Brandon, Jayden Daniels MVP on Twitter. 59 of 67 field goals, 88% overall. 27 of 28 from 30 to 39 yards. 16 of 19 from 40 to 49 yards. And 3 of 6 from 50 plus, his longest being 53 yards. Sorry, Hall.
Not bad.
I mean, listen, he's not a big leg, and there's a reason that Jacksonville, got rid of him. But
True.
If you can get me consistent from inside of 50, and you can handle, I think the important thing is going to be these new kickoff rules and special teams rules. Kind of, if he can handle the kickoffs and the directional, and be consistent with kind of popping the ball up and giving his kickoff team a chance, then he can stick. But ultimately, I think that when the roster's cut down in whatever it's going to be, 2-3 weeks, I think there's 20 teams in the NFL that have 2 kickers in camp. You're going to see some more rotation with the kicker world in Washington. But for now, I'm happy to have him in camp.
Yeah, I know in the Discord, one of the guys said, I think it was Scott Hartley, that the Jaguars drafted a kicker this year, and I don't think he's missed an extra point in his college career. So, that kind of makes sense for Patterson. Smart move by Washington. All right, Hall.
Yeah, no, that number 2 overall pick on the waiver wire definitely helped with that one. But
yep.
Speaking of a guy that might be hitting the waiver wire soon, there's been a lot of talk about Jamon Davis and him kind of transitioning. That was a nice transition, right? Transitioning to an edge rusher. And I heard it's been like kind of a mixed bag. Like there's some good, there's some bad. At the end of the day, when training camp is over and done with, I know he's been working with Ryan Kerrigan. He's been getting tips from Dorrance Armstrong and whatnot. Do you think Jamon Davis is on this roster at the end of training camp? I know it's still early, but as of right now, do you see him? If it was like cuts tomorrow or cuts this weekend coming, would you say he would be on the roster?
I'm interested to hear or see where you saw a kind of mixed bag from. I honestly haven't really seen much good, and
Mm.
it's unfortunate. He's just kind of an undersized defensive end, and he's struggled, and he hasn't really been able to put pressure on the quarterback at all. In this offseason, when they brought in Bobby Wagner, when they brought in Frankie Louvu, they signed Anthony Pittman and drafted Jordan McGee. You kind of looked at that as really a bad sign for Jamin. And I like the fact that they're trying to find somewhere that they can, use him. If they're going strictly on merit of what we've seen in camp, I don't think he'll be on this roster. But he is a guy who scored super high in the RAS, and we know about his athleticism and all those different things, and that's something this coaching staff likes. And so, if they're willing to keep him kind of on the back end of the roster as a flyer, hoping that he can continue to develop and be kind of a situational pass rusher, there's a chance he makes it. Unfortunately, for them, they brought in, Dante Fowler, who is what maybe they hope Jamon Davis can be. He's a situational pass rusher. He's not an every down defensive end. He can do a couple different things, but his big thing is his speed. And we've seen that already in camp. He's able to get around the edges. He's able to dip low, kind of get around and get to the quarterback. And, if you have kind of Dante Fowler as your situational pass rusher, your quote unquote speed guy, I don't know why you would also need Jamin. And quite frankly, he's a first round pick. So, you hope that he would turn into something. But 3 years ago, not this coaching staff, not this front office, not this ownership group, nothing really is there for him. And so I think you got to look at a lot of these draft picks from the past, 3-4 years and question kind of how they fit and where they're going to fit on this roster. And unfortunately for Jamin, I just think that, I like that the coaches are trying to find something, but I don't think that he's going to end up being one of the 53.
Yeah, I do think that with Jamin, with his speed, always brings it back to Lorenzo Alexander. And I don't think it's a bad idea to put him on punt and kick and tell him to, run as fast as you can and go make some hits. That I think that's something that's relative to him that would work. You just basing off the fact that what you said, like the later end, back end of that roster, right? Just based on how things fall, but just the way looking at it doesn't look great for Jamin. But
So
speaking,
real quick, Jamin's never played special teams in his career, and he certainly will have to
great
make
time to start learning.
But also with the new kick rules, these big guys with a lot of speed are a lot less important on kickoff and kick return because it's not so much about speed. It's about, being able to read a play in the backfield. And we know Jamin's kind of struggled with that a little bit. He could certainly help out on punt and punt return potentially. But again, nothing that he's ever done in his career. So he's trying to learn a new position. On defense, he's trying to learn special teams, which he's never done before. You're really throwing a lot at a kid who's gone through a lot already in the NFL.
Yeah, that's very true. Good point. But we got to bring this back to the second round pick this year. Diehard himself, Mr. Johnny McClain Newton, came back, was actually participating in full team drills, which was absolutely awesome to hear. We've heard a little bit about him, but honestly, I want to talk about Johnny. What have you seen thus far?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think Johnny Newton's a really important piece of this line because behind Deron Payne and John Allen, really you have John Ridgway and Fedarian Mathis, who are two players who essentially play the same position. They don't really give you the same thing that John and Deron give you in terms of being able to be aggressive and get after the pass rusher, and also, clog up holes. And I think that's where Johnny Newton can step in and help out a lot. You know, Last year, Duran and John both had to play far too many plays, far too high a percentage of plays. And I think you saw it wear on them as, in game. And then also, if you look big picture in the season, and Johnny Newton's a guy who can step in and rotate with both of them. So I think he's a really important piece. And, he hasn't done a whole lot. So I don't want to say that he's looked good or not looked good or, whatever you want to say about it. But, based on his body of work and, his body size and, the quickness that we've seen as they've been doing some of the individual drills, you're hopeful that he's able to step in and be, as impactful a player as he was in college.
Love to hear it.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, definitely going to be a big piece for that defensive line and that defense this upcoming year. And a guy that's going to be hopefully a crucial piece for the offensive side of the ball is going to be Brandon Coleman. I know that they've been doing a lot of mixing and matching and different combinations on the offensive line, trying to see what works and who gels together and whatnot. But they have been putting Coleman at left tackle. would you say that he's getting the first crack at the starting job right now? And how's he been looking when he's been inserted at left tackle?
Yeah, I would say it's probably his job to lose, but by no means does he have a stronghold on it. He's looked good in camp. To me, I think the most impressive thing is usually, rookie offensive linemen struggle with strength, and he's stepped in and he just swallows rushers, and it's impressive to watch him do it. Now he's struggled a little bit with speed with guys who are trying to work his way around. We talked about Dante Fowler, Cleveland Farrell as well a little bit, but I think that's something that he'll kind of adjust to. I think it's obviously the quickness of NFL players is different than what you see in college a lot. But I'm cautiously optimistic with him. I think that he'll probably take that starting left tackle role. But I think across the board, just kind of a big picture thing. When teams are good, are ready to compete for division titles, conference titles, Super Bowls, you have a pretty good feel of who kind of the starting 11 is on each side. This team isn't there yet, and there are going to be a lot of mixing and matching and kind of trying to figure out of who works, who fits where. And I feel like amongst the fan base, there's a lot of consternation about not naming Brandon Coleman your starting left tackle, not naming Nick Allegretti your starting left guard. Who's going to be your starting corners, whatever these positions are. And I think it's just important to point out that like you're trying to figure out who's NFL players and who can play and help you. And so there's going to be a lot of changes, I think, between now and that first game of the season when we're down in Tampa.
Very wise from you, Mitch. Playing football myself in high school and everything, it was the team that you were in camp heading into the season is a vastly different team than where you were at the end of the season. And of course, like you said, with the Chiefs, there is no question about it on who's starting for them. They know who it is. And for us, we're still in that phase of kind of identifying who we are, so to speak. So good job there. But to wrap this up, I only have a couple more questions for you, brother. Jayden Daniels, talk about the quarterback. Obviously, he's been lighting up social media. Obviously, the accuracy is something that Jahan Dotson brought up in his presser the other day, talking to Terry McLaurin, saying, look, he just puts it only where we can get it. From a media perspective, being there every single day without pads and with pads, what have you seen with the accuracy standpoint and just overall how he's done with the football?
Yeah, I mean he's still learning. Like I don't think that he's not going to step out there and be Patrick Mahomes from day one. We see some bad throws. We see him throw in the dirt some. We see him overthrow some guys. But I'll tell you what, what Jahan said was the biggest takeaway that I've had from it is
Okay.
his ball placement, especially on the move, is just really impressive. He does such a good job of putting the ball where either his guy is getting it or nobody, and that's both when he's throwing to the sidelines and when he's throwing over the middle of the field.
Mm.
There's some missed throws here and there, but his elite throws are super elite. He hit a ball downfield to Terry on Tuesday, and it was just Terry was in one-on-one, and Terry's a good good little kind of vet where he kind of bends it inside a little bit to give himself a little more room towards the sideline. But that ball is launched high and wide, and Terry's able to catch it in stride, and was able to turn it up and keep going. And then a couple plays later, he's rolling out to his right, and he hits Jahan, who's able to toe tap on the sideline and keep it in. So I've been impressed by him. He's looked good. I think when they get a real rush and he has to deal with players around at his feet and kind of getting out of the pocket and kind of understanding when to run and when to throw will be an important factor for him to work on. But you couldn't have asked for much more from him at this point in camp, and I'm optimistic with him as well. I think that his name's going to be right there in the mix for offensive rookie of the year all season.
My man. And my next question for you, I'm not trying to, we're not going back in the past, Mitch. We're past that point. I know you're not a man that loves to do that sort of thing. But just comparatively speaking, you have watched many training camps. You've been around this team for a while. With this coaching staff in particular, how they're running these practices, are there any notable differences just in the way that they're structuring and executing these practices?
Yeah, it's a very intentional practice. They started out kind of working on a lot of red zone stuff, and I liked Dan Quinn saying like, if we're not good in the red zone, we're not going to score points. And so they started out working there, and then kind of started working their way, further back with the offense. They started working, game type situations, and we've had a lot of frustrations over the past couple of years with end of half, end of game, game management, time management situations. And the fact that in the first week of training camp, they're already starting to work those into the schedule shows me that they understand the importance of those situations. And the more that you practice those, obviously, the better you're going to be when it comes to that point. And so, I think kind of the intentionality of how they go through practice is very impressive. And then the other part is just how much work they get done in such a short period of time. A lot of times, or every training camp that I've ever been to, when the receivers are running their route trees, you have two quarterbacks, two sets of receivers. They go each side. Here they have all four quarterbacks lined up, and they have four receivers that all go out for passes. Each quarterback has a different guy they have to hit, and so you just have a faster pace of practice. When you look at the defensive line, they would typically have a defensive end would rush, then a D tackle, then the other D tackle, then a D end. Here you're seeing all four rushing in concert, right from the start, and so you're getting more reps in a shorter period of time. And it's a much faster pace for these guys, and they're tired at the end of practice. I mean, they're walking off, dripping sweat. And granted, it's Virginia in August and or July. It's going to be uncomfortably hot anyway. But they just get a lot of work done in a really short period of time, and I appreciate that.
My man, last question I have for you. I have more, but I want to get this one in. The tight end room.
You're good. I have time. We can stay on. A little
I don't want to keep you up past your bedtime, Mitch. I know. Sleep is very.
Training camp comes early tomorrow. I know, but I'm good.
The tight end room. What of your opinion? Just looking at it, just how guys have looked, and obviously you being one of the, a lot like myself, being a covet of the O-line, how guys are blocking. How are the tight ends doing in that regard? Obviously, we only have a couple practices of being able to block in pads, but how is the tight end room looking?
Yeah, I mean, there are three roster locks. Zach Ertz, Ben Sennett, and John Bates, all roster locks. Dan Quinn pointed out, how impressed he was with John Bates on the day they were in full pads. We know who he is. We know that he's a good blocker and can catch the ball a little bit. Ben Sennett's been, kind of working a little bit in the blocking, kind of if Zach Ertz is your pass receiver and John Bates is your blocker, you kind of have Sennett who's working, kind of both. And he's a rookie. He's kind of learning. It'll be interesting to see kind of how they deploy him with the other two guys that they have in camp. But Zach Ertz has looked really good. And, he knows this Cliff Kingsbury offense extremely well. And you see it on the practice field, both with what he's doing and then also how he kind of helps the other guys get lined up correctly and he talks with the other receivers about depths and cuts and where they're supposed to be and how they're going to get there. And that kind of leadership is invaluable. And between him and Bobby Wagner, I think that's just a huge step up for this team, having kind of that internal player leadership there. As far as the back end of the tight end room, I think they're going to keep four, so it's going to be interesting. I don't know if I can really handicap Cole Turner, Armani Rogers, yank off about kind of where they're going to be. I would guess Cole Turner's probably a little bit in the lead. I think when you look at the tight ends, you have to look at the wide receivers. There's no receiver that's over 6'1" on this roster, so you're going to need some of those big bodies in the red zone, which is why I would think a guy like Cole Turner has a little bit of an advantage. But we've seen 2 years of Cole Turner showing out in training camp and then not doing a whole lot in games. Yep. And so I look at Cole Turner a lot like I look at De'Ami Brown, guys that can show out and look really good playing against air or playing against no tackling, non-tackling, and then kind of the game changes a little bit when there's a chance they take a hit. So I was most excited for Armani Rogers. That Achilles injury might have taken a little more out of him than we think. But if I had to say now, I would guess Cole Turner is probably your fourth. But it's really up in the air, and I think the preseason games and these joint practices will matter a lot for that group to figure out who's going to be on the roster.
Absolutely, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. So, Hall, you have a question for Mitch? I don't want to hog them all myself.
Yeah, just going back to Austin Eckler, I think that just like last year, you could say he had a down year, even though he had over 1,000 yards combined. Obviously, his touchdown totals weren't what they've been in the past, but I think due to the injuries, he kind of had like a down year for his standard, if you want to call it that. I think he's due for a big, I wouldn't call it big, but I do think he's due for a big year here in Washington. He's going to be a key component for this offense. And I was just kind of thinking to myself, like outside of Jayden Daniels, who do you think on this offense is kind of going to kind of be that key component to kind of really say, okay, this is why this offense is productive, or like this is why they're like a productive offense, I should say.
I mean, I'm going to turn it on your head a little bit because I think Brian Robinson is that guy. I think he might be, for fantasy people, I think he might be one of the biggest sleeper running backs out there. Cliff in the red zone loves to hand the ball off between the tackles. I think the threat of Jayden, keeping the ball, he's really good at at the read option stuff we saw obviously in college and we've seen a couple times in camp. I think Brian Robinson is going to be a double-digit touchdown guy. And to that point, I think Eckler is going to have a good season as well. He's going to be an important piece because of his ability to catch out of the backfield. But one thing that I think has surprised this coaching staff a little bit is the ability of Brian Robinson to catch the ball. And we've seen him running him in some wheel routes and some downfield stuff a little more than I think I expected to see in this offense. But I think they're impressed by his hands. And I think he's gonna have a big season. But Eckler will have a role in this offense. He's gonna be a third down back. I don't expect him to get a ton of handoffs, but he'll get his catches because he does every year, whether he's hurt or not. And the best part of all of it is that Austin Eckler recognizes the situation he's in. He recognizes the point of his career he's in. He recognizes the offense he's in. He's very much and seems to be entirely on board with kind of the role that he's going to have. And again, for a veteran to step in and have that humility or the ability to understand what's happening, I think is very important.
My man. And Mitch, I don't want any reporter speak. I want you to be completely 100% honest here, okay?
Am I ever not?
No, but you know what I mean, though. Like, not the political aspect of this all, but who is the biggest surprise of camp so far?
That's a good question. I would say maybe Mikey Sainer still.
Okay.
I think that he stepped right in on day one and was ready to go and was with the starting group. And when you watch him around the practice field, he takes, he's the first guy who is up in the individual drills. He's on defense. There are times that he is, directing some of the, more veteran players where to be and, pointing out strong and weak and all those different things. And that's just kind of the head game stuff. Nonetheless, the physical stuff that you see on the field. Now, he's not a huge body and they haven't done, a lot of hitting. So that's something that we're going to have to, keep an eye on. But I loved, the start early on in the last practice on Tuesday. Brian Robinson had a run, up the middle. He kind of slowed down after 50 yards or whatever it may have been. And Sainer still was just still after him and kind of fun, having fun with him, but punch the ball out. Ball comes free. They're all going dive in for it. That's just the kind of player that he is. He's a gritty, nose to the grindstone type guy who's, not gonna get himself, not gonna get cheated on any down. And I think when you look at, draft picks, we've become so used to the coaching staff telling us how we have to be patient and wait for them to develop and all these different things. And when you look across this roster, I mean, obviously Jayden Daniels is going to play an important piece. Sainer still Senate, Brandon Coleman, Johnny Newton, Jordan McGee. I mean, you're talking you're 5 rounds deep in the draft, and those you might have 5 or 6. I don't want to say starters, but regular contributors already from this draft. And maybe that speaks a little bit to the roster and where it's at. But I think it also speaks to the drafting of Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and kind of, I think how we as media and you guys as fans have to kind of, change our thinking about how draft picks are used and kind of get on board with the way the rest of the NFL is, because that's how you build good football teams, is by drafting well.
Thank you. Now I'm gonna leave this up to you, Mitch. My last question for you. I'm gonna leave this up to you. Do you want a special teams question or a defensive question?
Why don't you start with defensive, and then we can go special teams.
Defensively, the safeties. Obviously Derek Forrest being brought over. Quan Martin, Dan Quinn saying could possibly be the best tackler on the team at this point in time. Obviously brought in Jeremy Chin. What have you seen from that safety position? Do you see a lot of consistency in the starters with the ones?
They've been rotating a lot around.
Okay.
I mean, Jeremy Chin is a lock there. He's going to be your starter. It'll be interesting to see who the kind of the free safety is. They've been playing around with a bunch of different folks there. Quan and Derek Forrest a little less than I kind of thought, but Derek Forrest there too. I think when I look at the secondary as a whole, but the safeties maybe and the offensive line, those were probably the 2 biggest issues last year. Maybe the DBs, the secondary as a whole. And I think the coaching that these two groups are getting as compared to last year is at such an elevated level that it's, you're not seeing players run free behind the secondary, which is obviously something we got so used to seeing last year. And I think when you just kind of consider both the talent levels or the players that are there and the coaching combined, I think it's almost impossible that we're not going to see better play out of both of those groups. And so I like what I'm seeing out of the safeties. Jeremy Chin is just an absolute beast. It's, he and Frankie Louvu are just difference making players. Louvu, whether he's at a regular linebacker position or rushing the quarterback, is just a disruptor. And Jeremy Chin, you can just hear coming from a mile away, and he arrives with some thud behind him. So I like both of those guys a lot.
All right, you forced me to ask the special teams question, but with kick return and punt returner, um, just straight up, just based off your eyesight, what you have seen, your predictions for who's going to win those two positions as starter, and then has there been uptick in consistency of the players that are being used there in practice?
So I think Jameson Crowder is going to be your punt returner, which I think complicates the wide receiver room a little bit just because that
Yeah,
there's only so many spots there. But I think he's the best guy at it, and maybe the only guy that can really do it at a high level.
and not
Um,
fumble it.
the kick and not fumble it. The kick return situation is interesting because I think they're feeling out, how they want to use that position because with the new rules, with the guys kind of lining up, you know, 10, 20 yards in front of where they're going to catch it, it's much closer to a run play than it is a straight kind of kick return like we think about. And so I think having kind of those, small kind of quick guys isn't as important as having a guy who can kind of read holes and hit them. And so I don't know what they're going to end up doing there, but I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Chris Rodriguez ends up getting a lot of kick
Mm,
returns because as a running back, it's much closer to kind of what he would see in a day-to-day thing at the line of scrimmage than it is kind of your traditional kick return. So it's going to be probably a little bit bigger body than you're used to seeing back there, and certainly somebody who has some experience handling the football, with bodies around him.
absolutely love it, Mitch. I can't thank you enough for joining us on this Wednesday evening. You got an early day tomorrow. Go enjoy practice and that early presser. Now, make sure you let us know. Keep us updated on Twitter like you have been. But before we get out of here, I'd like to plug your social media handle and your show, just in case anybody watching, which we all know does not exist, haven't followed you yet, would like to, sir.
Yeah, it's Twitter and Instagram at Mitch_Tischler, and then it's the Beltway Football Podcast, both wherever you get your podcasts, and also on Monumental Sports TV on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And when you get to the season, it'll work as a kind of pregame show starting at I believe 11 o'clock on Sunday, so you can get yourself primed before you go to the national pregame shows.
My man, absolutely love it. Obviously, everyone knows about you guys, of course. But Mitch, have a good evening. Enjoy your weekend and enjoy practice, sir. We'll see you then.
Will do. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Appreciate it.
All right, Mitch. Always appreciate Mitch. He always has extra time for us, man. And it
I know,
bless his
right?
heart
He's always
'cause
just like,
he
all right, last
shouldn't.
question. He's like, no, I got more time. Just keep him coming. Just like, all
Like
right, cool.
he really shouldn't, though. You know.
I know.
But he does. He's such a nice dude, and it's really a blessing for these guys to all of the guests that come on the show that take time out of their day. Because like it's not like we're paying them, man, and like they take time out of their
Right.
day to do
Right.
this, take time away from their families, their jobs to be able, and their free time to be able to do it. Like Zach Selby, for example, such an awesome
Right.
group of people to be able to do that for us. But let's wrap up this episode, brother. We'll try to make this as funny as possible. I can't guarantee anything. I'll try my best. I might fail miserably, but you know what? We'll give it a shot. How about
I'm
that? How
gonna
does that
try
sound,
to
Hall?
identify as Reed today.
I think no, you're not white enough for that. I mean, literally, literally.
Nah, that's true. That's
Now,
true.
this next question, this one is from the Colonel, and he actually asked a couple good ones, but I want to get this one from you. Which one of them was actually regarding Jamon Davis, but Tim Towner had sent in one very similar. So I'm gonna ask these other ones. This one, third one by the Colonel was sent. He asks Hall. I recently heard Fred Smoot invent a new word saying that Jayden Daniels epitophizes what a budding superstar quarterback should be in this league. Very reminiscent of George W. Bush coining the term misunderestimated when describing his 2000 campaign. Is this a Texas thing? Is Fred Smoot from Texas? Mississippi, ain't
No, he's from Mississippi.
he? Yeah.
The everyone calls him the mouth of the South for a reason. That dude is hilarious. We met him a couple times, interviewed him, talked to him.
Dude, that
Just
it
on
will
the
go down. Like, in my personal opinion, that was the best. No disrespect to all of our guests. That was the best interview and probably the most aggravating for me that I've ever done was with Fred Smoot. Sorry to cut you off.
Nah, I mean you're right. Like you said, it was a live interview too. So like it was like you try to say something, he would just keep going and cut you off. But
No,
you
that
couldn't even
wasn't
do
why it
that
was
because he was
for
so
me. It was
funny. It was so
aggravating
funny.
because
He's just like, oh,
it was aggravating for me because it was like I'm trying to understand, like, get who he wants us to draft at the next at our pick at what was it 14 when we got when we traded back.
13,
Yeah,
16 or something like that.
yeah, and so he kept saying like N'Kobe Dean. He was like, "No, I don't like that guy. No, I wouldn't draft anybody from the Pac-12. No, I don't want anybody from the Big Ten." And I was like, at one point, I was like, "Well, who do you want to draft, man?" Do you know
Right.
what I mean?
There's only so many
Right,
conferences and players left. Like, come on.
dude, so funny. Hey,
Nah, Fred Smoot's the man though.
yeah, he is. He's from Mississippi, and I've been trying to get Fred back on with this, man, because I just know how much fun that was. And that seriously, what a night that was. That was a dream come true. Being
Yeah.
able to interview John Allen in person, interviewing Logan Thomas in person, and Kendall Fuller, of course, which was all just so freaking awesome. Next question
Yeah.
from the Colonel Hall. Sorry for cutting you off, but Fred Smoot just gets me hyped up. Surprising reports, including from Rico Street Scores, that Zach Ertz may not be as old and rusty as previously reported. He is shining at the tight end position and not displaying any age or injury-related issues. Is it possible we could get what we'd hoped out of Jordan Reed or Logan Thomas for a couple years before Ertz heads into the sunset?
Jordan Reed is going to be tough because like prime, like at his pinnacle peak, Jordan Reed was like probably a easily, not I'm not gonna say easily, but definitely probably top 5 tight end in the league.
And
And
who drafted him?
it, Jay Gruden,
No, it was Shanny.
was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It was Shanahan. You're right. Yeah, but no, I mean, yeah, Jordan Reed at his peak and his pinnacle when he was healthy was a top 5 tight end, like the epitome of kind of like what Travis Kelce and these dudes are now, just motion all over the field, killing you in the middle of the field, killing you in the red zone, athletic catches out the ass. So it's going to be hard to ever, I mean, not ever, but it's going to be hard for an older Zach Ertz to reach the Jordan Reed type level. And honestly, even like I can maybe see somewhat of a Logan Thomas type thing, but I mean, I'm not even going to sit here and like front. When we signed Logan Thomas back in 2020, I want to say it was, when there was other guys out there on the market that obviously had bigger names and more production, I was the one beating the table like, oh, we didn't do enough of the tight end position. To your credit, you said Logan Thomas can be that dude, and he was that dude that year. Um, I think he made a Pro Bowl that year. He was going crazy that year, double-digit touchdowns, I want to say.
That knee injury
And
was catastrophic,
I was gonna
man.
say he was on the ascend as far as like an up and coming, like even though he was kind of up there in age, he was like on the back end and kind of like a revival type of his career.
Yeah.
And then like you said, the knee thing kind of really took him down a couple notches. He's just like injury after injury, the concussion last year, kind of he never really came back from that. So I would say if you can get anywhere between semi-healthy Jordan Reed and like 2020 Logan Thomas out of Zach Ertz. And really, I'm not even really worried about his production per se. I'm just worried about can we get at least 12 to 13 games out of him this year? Because I think that if you can get 12 to 13 games out of him, the production will be itself. Like he knows the offense. Like we said before, he's a good red zone target. He eat the middle to field up, and I think that he can be a real good what's the word? A safety blanket for Jayden Daniels,
Yes.
especially rookie quarterback. A tight end is a tight end is the best friend of a young rookie quarterback as well as a running game. So I would say that if we can get 12 to 13 games out of Zach Ertz, I think the production will speak for itself. It's not going to be top tier. It's not going to be low tier. It'll be somewhere in the middle of like an average NFL tight end with a couple more touchdowns probably.
Yeah, and Colonel, I'll explain it like this. In my line of work, whenever we hire somebody new, right, you almost have to not babysit them, but overlook them, being able to help them get into the groove of things, and that does take time, right? It takes a lot of time. So when the bullets are flying, let's say on a job site, and the GC, general contractors, on your butt to get things done, you have to get things done. You have to get things done. Somebody being new being with you is not going to hold you back, so to speak, but you can't be going as fast as you normally can, right? Well, Zach Ertz being at tight end for Jayden Daniels is almost like having somebody that's been there for years that you respect, that you know has been there, knows what to do, getting there in that crunch time, and you're like, hey, I need this done, I need that done, and I need that done. So that's somebody when the bullets are flying, things are very hectic on the field. Zach Ertz is going to be that guy who's going to get to that soft spot in the zone, going to be staring at Jayden, waiting for that ball, be able to catch it and haul it in for him. Do I think that he's going to be breaking tackles left and right? Do I think that he's going to be making outstanding catches and scoring a crap load of points? No. But I think that he is going to be where he needs to be in order to help Jayden, like you said, as a safety blanket. That's where I think Zach Ertz really plays a huge part into this equation. Because, yes, we like to look at the game of football and say Jayden Daniels is going to come out and light everything up. Life is not perfect. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be people who are going to test you and battle you and make things chaotic and stressful. And people like Zach Ertz, Terry McLaurin are who you can really rely on to help you, ease you in those situations to say, I know what he's going to go do. I know he's going to do a good job at it. And when it gets stressful, when it gets high pressured situation, I know where I can find him when I need him, kind of thing, if that makes sense. How was that analogy? Was that good?
Yeah, no, that was good. Like, you explained it in lesser words to what I was trying to say.
Yes. I try to put an analogy in there in my line of work, and usually my analogies suck, dude. Now, the next question from the Colonel. The Commanders decided to drop Nick Gates, Hall, taking on a $5.3 million dead money hit this year. Was this wise, considering he was a 17th ranked center in the league last season, and our lack of depth along the offensive front? He was just signed by the Eagles to take snaps at both center and guard.
Yeah, I think it was a smart decision. He got benched last year, and rightfully so. He was not very good. Um, Definitely looked the part, walking around training camp with his shirt off, long hair, aggressive dude, always like kind of like the bully of the offense, which you need the tough guy, you need the bully. The offensive line definitely needs that type of guy, which now I think it is Sam Cosmi. I think he's not only the leader of that group, but he's the bully. He's a tough guy of that group. And so I'm not really worried about Nick Gates. If he gets in any playing time in Philly, thank you, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne. Like what Shaq say? Barbecue chicken all day, every day. So, yeah, not really worried about Nick Gates. He did not play well for us last year. Obviously, it was a bad free agency signing because he was benched like whatever week it was during the year and was not picked up again in free agency here. So, yeah, like you said, don't want to rehash the past because it wasn't good last year. Nobody was really good last year, and he was part of that group. So, if you don't do your job, you got to go.
Yeah, maybe Nick Gates does really well with Philly. I like no disrespect to him. I hope he doesn't. I hope this is a condemnation of an indication of where Philly's offensive line could possibly be, and nobody's seeing it. Right? Like that's where my mindset is going. But in reality, for me, Colonel, like when you take over somewhere new, you like to have people that you're familiar with to say, especially if you're drafting a rookie quarterback. We've talked about this. Having a veteran center that you trust is way more important than left tackle, in my personal opinion. Just based on if you want a rookie center or a rookie left tackle, I'd rather a rookie left tackle and a vet center with a rookie quarterback. That's my only point here.
Somebody to call the protections out for him.
Exactly. And Dan Quinn, going against this guy all the time in practice, knowing what he's going to be getting out of him, I feel like it's more of a trust thing, more so than it is about who Nick Gates is, how he did, and everything like that. I think it's more so of just knowing what this guy brings to the table and maybe having more questions about Nick Gates, and that dead money is something that you can salvage and be okay with as long as that trust is there. But also, Ricky Stromberg is no slouch himself, who can play center and guard, but obviously they've been saying that he's possibly third string at this moment at center. But that rotation is obviously very important. And look, if Nick Gates balls out for the Eagles, I'm sure it's going to be talked about and laughed about at us. But at the end of the day, it just didn't work out for us. And especially against the Giants, I think he had a horrible game against the Giants. And we can't mortgage that again. We got to beat the Giants this year.
Dexter Lawrence looked at Nick Gates and was like, barbecue chicken.
Yeah, and so that can't happen.
Plus, at the end of the day, like I'm not out here ranking all 32 centers in the NFL. Like that would be crazy. I could probably name like 5. But I will say this: if he's ranked to 17th, you can only imagine what Taylor Biotis is ranked at. So I think we upgraded. We're doing fine.
Yes. And now let's move to the Discord questions. This one is from Tim Towner the first. We still have a ways to go, but do you see us keeping all 9 draft picks on the final 53?
Ooh, that's a good one.
But I would have to ask, what does keeping mean? Like,
Yeah,
is
because I was gonna
practice
say
squad
practice
keeping?
squad.
Yeah.
If you're including practice squad in that, then I would say that's a pretty good chance that they're gonna be keeping all 9, just because obviously we all know when it comes down to cut days, it comes to a numbers game and whatnot. But just because you get cut doesn't mean you can't come back to the practice squad. So I would say yes. I would say a lot of people were talking about and hyping up Dominique Hampton, like pre-training camp and OTAs and whatnot.
Yeah, Adam Peters
That's
said
a
at the Senior Bowl when he walked, or at the Combine when he walked out of the tunnel with the rest of the DBs, he was like, "Who is that guy?"
Yeah,
Is
who
how
is that
big he
guy?
was.
That's a guy I want to draft.
Yeah.
So we haven't heard much about him. Obviously, there's a lot of safeties out there on the field right now and on the depth chart. So he's probably obviously buried. He's more of like a depth guy and a special teams guy. So I would say that if anyone was gonna get maybe like not make the 53, but still make the practice squad, just like I said, a numbers game, and I don't know what he's been doing on special teams or if he is doing special teams right now. So I'd say maybe him, but if you want to say practice squad included, I would say there's a pretty good chance all 9 will definitely get kept.
Yeah, and like when you say that, it just makes you wish that we were at training camp again, like we
Yeah,
were last year.
I
Just
know.
being able to
I
see
know.
with our own eyes, not having to.
Dog, I was thinking about it because I was like, oh, my brother is like Martin Malcolm's birthday is on Sunday, and that was one of the open practices. And Malcolm's like a Broncos fan, but I was just gonna be like, whatever, just come with us. Martin's a Skins fan, Commanders fan, but literally, I talked to him about it a day later. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go online, see what's up. Everything was already sold out. So credit to the fans that are like hyped about training camp and getting out there and seeing things, but which is a good thing. Everything is sold out. But yeah, I was definitely trying to get out there for a day, but didn't work out.
Yeah, really jealous of all of you guys. So enjoy it, soak it up, and really embrace what's happening here. And yes, is this Adam Peters' team, Tim? Did Adam Peters select all those 9 draft picks? With all the turnover we've seen, we're keeping them. Okay,
Right.
this is gonna be a
I will
young
say
team.
this though, they're not gonna be like kind of like running them where they're just keeping them for the sake of keeping them because it makes them look a little bit better. Like, hey, look, we kept all the draft guys. Like, da da da. So if like someone doesn't deserve to make the even like the practice squad,
Credit,
I
okay.
have faith that Adam Peters and them will definitely be like, hey, sorry, it didn't work out. But like you said, it's a beginning stages of like a whole new
Right.
rebuild. They're looking for guys that can be long term guys. So more than likely, you're going to keep all 9 guys around at least for this year. Maybe next year, who knows? But definitely for this year.
It's a rehab, not a rebuild. Well,
Retool. It's a
yeah,
retool.
retool, rehab, the same thing. I'm with you there. And so I do think that they're keeping him. Now, the next question from Tim Towner. Keim and Weinstein had a lengthy discussion regarding Jamon Davis and how the signs and the numbers don't seem to be on his side, and that he might be a candidate to be traded for a low to mid-range pick at some point before week 1. What say you?
I mean, hey, we've seen Adam Peters and his front office work their magic before with like flipping guys like Sam Howell and working their magic in the draft, kind of flipping with the Eagles those 2 draft spots and moving up all those couple spots to get their guys. So if they can make something work for Jamin and they already know that they're going to plan on cutting him and he's not going to make the 53 because obviously they're not going to put him on the practice squad. So if he's not going to make the 53 and they can get a 4th, 5th round pick for him, something like that. I mean, definitely, I would make that move. We've seen what Adam Peters can do with later round picks and how he can find the gems and whatnot. So, yeah, I would say if you can flip him, then go ahead.
Yeah, look, Keim and Bram, they are way closer to the team than we are. They are at practice every day. They talk to some high value people way more than they let known, and they know the biz, right? And so whatever they say, I would say go with and trust in. All I'll say is if somebody offers a draft pick for Jamin Davis, you tell him to hop in his car and go as fast as he can to Dulles Airport. You know what I'm saying? Go as fast as you want, brother. Just do it. Go right ahead. The quicker you get there, the better. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. Now the next question is from Yam Sensei. Hall, just from a journalistic or broadcasting point of view, I have seen people across various networks, websites, and social media with wildly varied predictions for the team and individual players, and across them all, there is very little consensus. Is this more due to the team still having so many unanswered questions across players and personnel, or is there something deeper behind it?
If this was still like a Dan Snyder owned team, and I would probably like my conspiracy, like just the inner thoughts in my mind would be like, there's definitely something against us. No one likes us because of Dan Snyder, da 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 da. But because we have a whole new it's a whole new and Bruce Allen as well. No one liked Bruce Allen, but we have a whole new coaching staff.
John
Dan Quinn
Gruden
is a
did.
really liked.
John Gruden did.
Yeah, that's true. But Dan Quinn's like a guy that's liked throughout the NFL. Everyone has nothing but good things to say about Dan Quinn, and a lot of the coaches on this coaching staff. New ownership group, obviously. Everyone likes Adam Peters as far as like a GM and like a guy that can evaluate talent. So I would just say it's definitely more of like they're looking at the roster. They're saying, hey, who's the guy? Who's their answer at left tackle? Who's their cornerbacks? Like their secondary going to be is kind of shaky. They're definitely I will say this. They're not like boots on the ground here day to day. They're not really following the team day to day. So they're not really tracking like, oh, this player and that player and oh, this group is really meshing well. They're just more looking at it from they were ranked this last year. They were this bad last year. Although they did turn over 2/3 of the roster, but they still have questions here, and here, which are kind of key positions on the field. And they don't have a lot of depth behind those key positions if something were to happen, knock on wood. That's basically what they're going off of. But obviously, it's the NFL. Any given Sunday, injuries are definitely going to play a role, whether we have them or don't have them, and for other teams and whatnot. So I would just say that no one has us winning double-digit games, which is obviously I wouldn't even pick us to do that. And I have a lot of homer in me. But I would say that for the people out there like Adam Rank, who does this dumb bit every year, they're like, oh, they're going to have 4 wins or 5 wins or 6 wins. I would say that there's a reason why Vegas set them at 6.5 is because a lot of people think they can be a average to maybe average to a little slightly above average or average like slightly below average. So anywhere between 7 and 9 wins.
I agree
If
with you.
that's the consensus on them, I think that's the correct consensus. Anything higher or lower than that, I would say is just people just trying to do clickbait stuff for Washington.
Yeah, and the way that you answer, I think, was very well put in the sense of like the unanswered questions, because I do think there is something to that. Do I think it's deeper? No, not really. But in reality, I think it's one portion of people who are thinking the more negative, pessimistic side are looking at it like Mitch is, saying they have a lot of they don't have solidified starters here in all these other places. In reality, going against these other teams, is that really going to stack up on game day on Sundays? And I can understand that. But then there's the optimistic view of the other people, and that's where you see the wide range of opinions saying they have a rookie quarterback, new head coach. We've seen this before where a team can just, for some reason, catch fire and just do really well, right? And I think that's the side that they're getting as well. So do I think there's something deeper to it? Not really. But what I think is just everyone having a differing opinion and some people being more open to the fact that something could spark here. You know, like 2012. But even 2012, they weren't a great team to start that year, right? It wasn't until like week 8, week 9 that they really started to push and go along. As much as everyone likes to, crown RG3 for that year, which it was special, but we also had to take into consideration it wasn't like they were blowing the doors off everybody. It took a little while. Yeah. And so we do have to take that into consideration. But I think with the optimistic view, I don't think it's crazy to think that they could reach double digit given the defensive pedigree of the staff and the coaches that they have on staff and getting these guys prepared, because it's not like it's going to be one-sided like 2012. You actually might have that defensive concrete players, playmakers, and staff to be able to hold things down during those tumultuous times like early on in 2012. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but just saying that I could see both sides of the equation, if that helps explain it at all. Now, the next question, this one is from Tim Towner. Hotel California is the best rock song ever. Best guitar, best lyrics, best vocal, sounds kind of spooky, and the dueling guitar solos at the end are unique. better than Stairway to Heaven. What say you?
Sure.
I
I
know that.
guess.
Look, man, with rock songs in particular, like I don't agree with you there. Like Hotel California is a fantastic song. Absolutely love it.
I do like Hotel California.
Very good song. Surprising to hear you say that. I'm not gonna lie to you, but
Come on,
just
man.
based off the kind of music that I hear at practices and stuff, like the auto tune rappers just literally talking, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is a banger." I'm like, "Dude, he's just talking. He's just talking, man." With rock songs, I have a long list of songs I absolutely love, of course, but for me personally, I think I have a long list of them. But I'll go like "Shook Me All Night Long" by AC/DC. I think is one of the best. I think "Thunderstruck," as much as it gets played, is one of the best songs ever. I think Fleetwood Mac has a couple bangers in there. You could even say Led Zeppelin's "Kashmir" obviously is up there as well. But for me personally, I do have to disagree with you, Tim. Now the next question we have, this one is from Arch. A lot of talk about first, second, third string, especially in the O line and in the secondary. Witt said he doesn't have 11 starters on defense. He has packages. Is some of this still figuring out the right pairings? Pads on will be different, possibly mixing youth and veterans. Do you expect to see different lineups as camp progresses?
For defense or offense
Yeah,
or what?
defense.
Defense. Yeah, I definitely think that. Yeah, going like you said, going back to what Joe Witt said, whenever that was during the offseason, I guess maybe he got hired or what it was, something like that. But he said he doesn't have starters. He has about, I think he was like 16 to 18 guys that are going to get significant playing time. So, to your point, it's definitely going to be a rotation of guys. Like, I'm sure as the season goes along, they're going to kind of probably pare that down from like 18 to maybe like 14, 15, whatever it may be, injuries, whatever the situation may be, different packages, guys that are playing better than they thought they would play are going to get more playing time, and guys that they thought that were going to be pieces that they could play more are going to play less because of whatever reason. So you may start with 18, like whatever the number we want to throw out there may be, but I would, like I said, as the season goes along, maybe like week 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, along somewhere along those lines, I think that you'll start seeing more of like the concrete kind of 12, well, not 12, like 13, 14, maybe 15 guys that are going to be in the rotation and really getting that significant chunk of the playing time.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Dan Quinn talked about this in his presser the other day, Arch, talking about like now is the perfect time to move guys around and see what you can do, right? And you don't want to be doing that in the season, right? Because you don't want to be
Right.
throwing those defensive schemes and different formations around in season and then possibly being susceptible to miscommunications, guys not being in the right location, right? So right now is the perfect time to move everybody around. So once you get closer to the season, that's when you get into, like you said, the more concrete formations, what you actually want to provide, right? So at the moment, I think that they are just doing everything possible to see what guys can do. But I do think that I think Joe Witt is correct in what he's saying. Because one thing Dan Quinn has been consistent ever since he's gotten here is you play a guy to his strengths. What does he do well? That's what we are going to feed in. Whatever he does well, we're going to put him in the position to do that well. And so I agree with him in that sense, and that's why I think that they're going to have multiple formations to be able to plug different guys in to be able to do what they want to be able to do to an offense. And so I think it's very easy to say that they have different formations. They don't have 11 starters. They have I guess you could say 17 dogs, heat-seeking missiles, so to speak. And I think that's where like guys like Derek Forrest, Quan Martin, Jeremy Chin kind of play in there to be what they do well, what they can do for you, and how you supply them and how you put them onto the field. Like with Frankie Louvu being kind of a heat seeker himself on the quarterback, Jeremy Chin can operate in that linebacker way. So you could use more of DBs and then having Jeremy Chin acting as a linebacker next to Bobby Wagner. There's a multiple amount of combinations you can have with the guys that we have on the field, and that's what's so intriguing about them. Because as much as an offense can watch what our defense does against one team the week before, against different players based on what the offense has provided, you can actually counter that with something they haven't seen before. And that's what you're trying to iron out now. You want to make sure when you put those guys on the field in those situations, can they be able to be productive, be where they need to be, making sure that there are no holes in the defense, because that is your biggest concern, is making sure you're applying pressure, but you're not allowing anything behind you. That's the biggest concern for any defense, applying pressure and not allowing anything behind you. If you allow something behind you, you're done. We've seen that in the J.J. McCarthy highlights from Vikings camp. Their secondary is allowing bomb after bomb. You know what I mean?
We've seen it here for the past couple of years.
Yep. And
especially to start the season, just getting beat left and right, deep. Eventually, Chris Harris in the secondary would sew it up. But you saw it last year. Different DB coach, never got fixed.
Yep. And then that's not even including Johnny Newton, adding him into this equation and what he can possibly bring to the table. And Jordan McGee himself. It's going to be a lot of fun to be able to watch his defense in particular, just to see how they mold. Because, like, for me, like, when I played football in high school one year. I was ineligible my senior year. I don't want to get into that. My junior year, it was the first year of this high school. So I played varsity, but it was similar to what they have done here, where you have a bunch of guys that you know can play football, have played football before, but mostly you're just getting normal guys, right? The Island of Misfit Toys. And so the first part of camp, it's easy to say, oh, I think they could do pretty well. But in reality, you know, not everybody is exactly where you want to be with them. You still have to figure them out. You still have to see how they play in a game. And it's hard to do that before the season starts. And so I find a lot of comparisons between the two in regards to this football team. Whereas in year 2 of Seaburg, which would have been my senior year, we were able to go, I think third week in playoffs with the team, just because, like, after that, having that 1 year was so pivotal, and the importance of knowing what you're putting these guys into and the difference 1 year makes is incredible. And so I think that's where, like, a guy like Mitch saying that before kind of means, and I agree with him in that sense, because I find a lot of comparisons to that junior year. I had a lot of freaking fun. I miss it, of course, and my dumbass being ineligible, but we'll need to get into that. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap us up for this episode. If you've made it this far, you're a freaking champion. Unlike Reed, I appreciate all you guys. I'm Kyle.
I'm Hall.
And we'll see you guys again on Sunday night. Make sure you check in then, because it is a timely episode. I will say that. All right, everybody, have a good, safe week. Enjoy it. Washington football. Woo! What's up, everyone? This is Kyle from the Burgundy Zone. We are releasing our own merch to support the show. If you want to rock the Burgundy Zone logo, or you want to see Reed's face on your shirt, we got it. We're starting with t-shirts, hoodies, and zip-up. So if you're a fan of the show, make sure you snag one before they are gone. Check out the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can find the link in the description of the video. Thanks again for all your support. Until next time.